Hello.
Hey,
Hey, Doug. Good to see your
hey, buddy.
good to see your face.
Yeah,
Yeah. Wow. You looks like you got weather like we have. It's overcast and kind of cold.
yep. It was nice and warm, at least by our standards. It was
Yeah.
up in the 70s today.
Yeah. So
This,
you
this is
work.
my this is my office here.
Oh,
The
wow.
the house is the house is pretty insane at this point in time. Right
Yeah.
after dinner and kids running
Yeah.
around, so
Oh, well,
figured.
that's a nice hermitage. Your hermit, your hermit
Sure.
hut.
If it starts raining, I can seek shelter. I'd hop right up here.
Yeah. So you said that your workload has picked up?
Yeah, we we're a contractor for the state,
Yeah.
and of course, anybody already needing assistance in the first place, the, we are making a lot of calls and
Mm-hmm.
helping everyone realize that the assistance is still continuing, and
Mm-hmm.
there's extra support out there,
Yeah.
connecting people with churches or food pantries and things like that. So,
Yeah. How's your Kentucky neighborhood dealing with the stress of it all?
I tune out, so I've
Oh.
got the little pods of my workplace and phone calls and my own family unit that
Hmm.
everything seems fine on the outside, but I I mean I'm not that tuned out, but it's
Yeah,
picking up
right.
here. There's quite a few cases. We're not on lockdown like you guys are,
Oh, okay.
or
You're not on
there.
lockdown. Okay.
Not
Yeah,
just yet.
it's interesting that each governor, each state is deciding that, which that's not necessarily bad. It's just we'll wait and see. Who's that? Is that Johnny? Oh,
Uh, I'm going to change my name so I'm not
oh,
mindful AI.
oh, okay.
So I'm on the phone, so I'm working on figuring this out.
Oh, I gotcha. Cause oh,
I'm glad you could make it on here.
yeah, about 45 minutes ago or so, internet at the house went down and it was popping in and out, but finally it kicked in. So I was glad because I don't have any other resource to get online. I mean, I can get to the site through my phone, but I don't have a Zoom app or anything on it. And I don't like that's the phone is too small for me.
Uh, Try this out here.
Nice, nice.
Not too bad.
Yeah,
So I guess
yeah.
we'll have
It's
a few other people on today.
yeah. I really liked your I don't know what you want to call it, but your dream notes, your notes from your dreams. I really liked what was going on there as far as the way you were paying attention. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's not covered along with yeah. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, I
Or,
can.
oh, okay. So that was pretty
Oh,
pretty interesting. That's my
yeah,
I'm on a
Mateo.
lucid dreaming kick, so it's
Yeah,
a very interesting process there.
yeah. Hi, Mateo.
Ties in.
Hi,
Yeah.
Michael.
Hello, buddy.
Hi, Doug. How are you?
Doing fine.
Good, good. Long time no see. The beard's gotten longer. My hair's gotten longer too, probably.
Yeah, everything grows, right? There's
Yeah,
glad you could make it.
thank you. Sorry, pardon the interruption.
Oh, that
Mi-
was
Yeah,
all right.
we were
Michael, where
talking
are
about
you?
I'm actually in Southern California in a city called Riverside. How about yourself? I forget where you're located.
Santa Cruz, not far from you.
No kidding. You're in Santa Cruz. Oh, you lucky
Fel-
dog.
Felton, actually. Those are redwoods back there.
That is awesome, Mateo.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. I love it here. Yeah, I love the Santa Cruz Mountains. But we're not that far from each other. River, yeah, we're 4 or 5 hours driving. Kentucky's a little bit further.
Yeah, that's true.
I
That's
think
true.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had, he still lives there. I had a friend that still lives there, and about 15 years ago, I spent quite a little time up there. I wish I could move up there, but I don't have the income to afford it.
It's crazy. Yeah, this area is insane. I could not afford. I bought my house 3 months after the 2008 crash.
Oh, wow.
I couldn't afford my house today. I mean, I don't. Yeah, you would need. You almost need a dual income with 6-figure salaries each
Yeah.
to afford to live here. It's kind of crazy.
Are you guys on shutdown there?
Yeah, all of California at this point.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Hey, TJ. Long time no see. I haven't seen you since Tuesday. Or was it Monday?
Was it Monday? I think it was Monday.
Time
It's
is
amazing.
flying. Time is kind of compressing or falling apart.
Yeah.
Hi, TJ. I'm Mateo.
Hi, Mateo. Pleased to meet you.
Likewise, I've seen your name a bunch on Infinite Conversations.
I'll refrain from comment.
Where
Good
are
to see your
you?
face, TJ.
Hey, Doug. Good to see you.
Where are you at, TJ?
I'm in Mercer County in New Jersey.
Oh, okay.
Actually, it's like in the middle of the state,
Oh, okay.
on the opposite side of Trenton.
Mm. Marco was going to show up, wasn't he, Doug?
Yeah, I think Marco and perhaps Johnny said he might be here, so
Oh, okay.
we will see what entails in this conversation. What was posted is something Marco spun together, and then I just happened to respond to somebody. So we'll let.
Whoa, Johnny Davis at nighttime. That's unusual.
It was a nice fade in too.
Yeah, nice fade in.
Hi, Johnny.
Greetings, everyone. Hello.
Hey.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. My internet service has been a little sketchy today, too. I think you said you had trouble, TJ? Yeah. I think I heard that Netflix and YouTube are very slow because of the internet increase of people drawing on those services. So we should maybe expect that. Okay.
Yeah, that along with we found out Zoom was having a few issues as well.
A lot of issues, yeah. That's interesting.
Hi, Marco.
Howdy. See everybody.
We're all just checking in here so far. I guess TJ and Michael hadn't met Mateo before, so got introduced there. Got 2 in California, 2 in the New York area, and 2 in the mid-US, perhaps. I don't know what Kentucky and Colorado is considered.
Doug, you look
Please,
like
this
you're
will
in some
be-
kind of apocalyptic bunker there.
I'm not allowed to disclose my location, but perhaps the chalk drawing give away a little bit. Things have gotten a little crazy here, but not that crazy. No, the house is pretty wild right now. Bath time after dinner and small household, 6 individuals inside. This is the perfect space for me right now. I don't have a pod like you do, Marco. I assume you'll have that for a few more months, weeks. I don't know.
We'll see.
You know, you have a lot of changes as well.
Yeah, the future is up for grabs, I guess. We'll see what happens. Has everybody checked in and introduced themselves?
I think I know everybody. I think everybody knows everybody now, right? Great.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well,
Like to take the lead, Marco. You had posted a poetic interlude or introduction, segue into something here.
I will give it a college try. I am, I find myself in the midst of a lot of cross currents and a kind of rubbing up against each other of multiple dimensions of concern and multiple scales. And, at the same time, kind of riding it, feeling it happen and allowing it and seeing what's going to happen next and not exactly knowing and feeling some anxiety about that, but at the same time, a certain amount of curiosity about it. I find it hard to cleanly differentiate between the personal and the public, the world as such, the historical, like what's happening in the macrocosm, I find is often a reflection of the microcosm and vice versa. There's an entanglement between them, but it's not a one-to-one simple correspondence. It's a mysterious correspondence. And sometimes things line up and sometimes they don't line up or don't appear to line up. But it's interesting to me how the personal changes, challenges, difficulties, disasters can be reflected in collective ones and in these kinds of events that we experience as a humanity, as a common humanity, as people, as sentient, intelligent beings who have certain shared contexts, which we share through our technological platforms, through our language, through our culture, through our metaphysics. And so when something like this coronavirus event unfolds, on the one hand, it's very novel and it feels very surprising and jarring. And who would have thought that this virus would emerge just now? Many people who study public health or who've studied history have seen that something like this would come along, and the conditions are ripe for it when you have a globalized society and all of the interconnections between places afforded by travel and technology and communications and global economy, etc. This kind of scenario was foreseen, but I don't think it was predicted exactly that this would occur. And so on the one hand, it has this novel character. On the other hand, it's like something we know deep in our DNA. Like we have been through this before. And so we go into certain, I would say, almost prescripted responses to the news that we hear or to the threats that we perceive. And those run the gamut from the very ignoble and selfish to the very noble and transcendent and ethical and moral and so forth. And so it's interesting to see how when something like this happens, how it impacts your day-to-day life and the stories that you tell yourself and the stories that emerge between you and the people around you. And it's a curious kind of situation that we're in because on the one hand, this pandemic is the result of a massive interconnectedness. And on the other, the solution to that, to the problem of transmission is to disconnect. And so how do we connect and be disconnected at the same time? Because on the one hand, this virus is a biological agent. It's a biological process that is just going to play itself out according to the rules of the game at that level of existence. But on the other hand, it's also a story that we tell, and we bake interpretations and we consume and transmit. We become hosts for and replicators of ideas about what this event means, what the virus is, what it means to be infected, what it means, what one's obligations and rights are with respect to the larger society. I mean, suddenly very few people I hear are complaining about martial, essentially a kind of martial law. A lot of people, everybody's just falling in line. And so what does that say about who we are and what our kind of latent potentials are? I think the thing that is also interesting to me about this moment is that it feels right in a certain way, like it makes sense in the story of the world as it's unfolding. And we've studied a lot of this and from various angles and looking at different thinkers, and not only thinkers but poets, novelists, painters, musicians. Like, something is happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear, but what is that thing that's happening? What's the larger story? And then how does this coronavirus or COVID-19, even what we call it, is, I think, a question. Like, how does this play into the larger story? How does it change it? How does it confirm it? And what role can we play? And how are we as storytellers fashioning the meaning of the event, and even the potential real consequences and like unfolding futures of this event? So that's just to riff and share some of what I've been thinking about in the last number of days. And I'm very curious how each of you are receiving, reacting to, responding to, understanding, questioning, feeling uncertain about, or feeling like you have some gem or germ of insight or observation to share. I'd like this space to be open for a multifarious investigation, inquiry, and play as well, to the extent that we can play in such dire, seemingly dire circumstances. I'd like to have an exchange, heartfelt and open-minded, conscious exchange. So thank you.
Thank you, Marco. I really like the way you laid it out and everything. And I'm not sure I'm going to bring my best A game, but I'm going to play. I like to play. And one of the things that my practice, fortunately, has helped me at this time with everything you expressed, is how the body and all the senses, which does not just include the five senses, but this falling of visible, invisible, going and fading in and out, and even my feeling tone going in and out, and engaging people I care about on the street. I've had a few little moments of engaging friends and that are in panic mode, which I have panic, but because of my practice, I've learned how to channel. How to use it as energy rather than just, it's just to meet the moment. And the main thing that I'm used to, like you pointed to, from my own personal experience and reading, like you said, growth has cost. We are growing. We've hit a tipping point in so many ways that is intermixing both the material and the psychological. And I'm hoping, or I'm of the aspiration that, not in a overly idealistic way, but they're ideal somewhat, that this is a precious moment for all of humanity, in my sense. There's going to be some pain and suffering that we're going to have to deal with, but we won't get out of this unless we turn towards it, and together, as many people like we're doing on this site right now. So that's my take on it. It's really pissed me off that they're using the word Corona, because now I can't drink the beer. So
if only it were the Modelo virus or the Budweiser virus. Or
Budweiser virus. I hate Budweiser.
Budweiser is a virus.
Well, I just thank you all for being here. This is very challenging, I'm sure, for everybody. I thought the page that you set up, Marco, was great, and there's just a ton of questions that you had. I hope by the time this is, before we finish tonight, I hope you'll find one of those questions that you are most attracted to and explore that, because there's just so many. And I'm hoping I can chunk down and chunk slow. I just want to read something very briefly from this new book, The Simulation Hypothesis. He's talking about the cells in your body, and I'm sure we've all heard this many times before. I remember hearing about this when I was a teenager in biology class. The cells in your body have been replaced many times. You are literally not the physical person that you were many years ago. There must be some information or patterns that defines who you are and tells the cells how to grow. This applies not just to healthy, but also to diseased cells. Theoretically, if all the cells are replaced, any diseased cells should just disappear on their own. This doesn't happen because of patterns of information. Even biological entities at their core follow a computational structure. What's new there is that this author claims that that is computational, which when I first heard this, which was declared as a biological fact back in high school, we didn't have computers, so that would not have been in anybody's vocabulary, but now it is. So I have to sort of press the pause button and wonder what in the world he's talking about. I think it's interesting that I have, when the AIDS epidemic hit the gay community, it was a tidal wave, and it tore people apart. I had 1 week where I lost 3 friends. I lost 3 friends in 1 week, and to my confusion and maybe even a little shame, I couldn't see everybody at the hospital. So, but I didn't know they were all going to die. You know, I saw one person and I thought, well, I'll get around and seeing the other 2 later on. But they died before I was able to make that happen. So, and over again, after as a caregiver, a care partner, I found myself taking care of others long term. And noticed that when the person often died, there would be so many people who come out of the woodwork crying and saying, oh, I really wanted to hang out with them because I really love them and all that. And I went, well, you had plenty of time to do that. I didn't say that, but that's what I was thinking, because I didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings, because I know where they're coming from. We just think we have all the time in the world, and none of us ever have all the time in the world. We're here for a very, very brief time. And I found my friend Bobby. I just remembered him as you guys were talking, because he was diagnosed. He was one of the first people diagnosed with AIDS. There were a lot of people who got sick and died, but there was no clear diagnosis of what it was. They had a label. They called it GRID, which had something to do with gay-related immunosuppressive something. Later on, they came up with AIDS. Just like I'm sure somebody's sitting around having a career, they were probably drinking Corona, and they say, well, what are we going to call this virus? Hey, let's call it Corona. You know? So I think that we have to be very sensitive to the fact that our doctors and nurses and people in the medical establishment and the pharmaceuticals who want to make some money off of this, they are often, some people are very sincere and very deep researchers, but they are under pressure to perform and to make something happen and make something work. And so I'm very sympathetic, because, you know, that's not going to happen. There's not going to be a vaccine for maybe it takes about at least a year. And even if there was a vaccine, you know, we don't know what the results of that are going to be. But I am recalling my friend Bobby, just to give you a little. He was the first person that was diagnosed with AIDS, AIDS. He called it the Big Apple, the Big A. That's what he called it. But he had lesions on his body, lower part of his body especially. But otherwise, he was a runner. He was beautiful, blonde, blue-eyed, California boy. You know, we would go running around the track. He was always much faster than I was. And he never had a cold in the 2.5 years I was hanging out with him. He was very serious about his health, and he had a macrobiotic diet. He was a macrobiotic chef, very creative guy. But I'm just bringing him up because once he was in California, he was in an earthquake. And he said, everyone got hysterical. They were screaming and yelling and terrified. And he felt so calm. And he said, it was so nice to be around people who were, he said, usually he felt like he was always the borderline panicked, hysterical person. And everyone else seemed to be going on about their daily lives, you know. But suddenly when there was a huge pattern interrupt, he noticed that people were freaking out. And he got very centered in those moments. And I'm just remembering that now because I'm surrounded by people who are panicking and freaking out, and I'm not. And that may not be a good sign, I don't know, but I feel borderline euphoria most of the time because I feel like almost like the intensity which I struggle holding without blowing my fuses, that intensity I see now distributed among lots of people. And so, oh, that's great. Now I don't have to do this intensity thing so much. I can just kick back and watch and observe and, you know, pay exquisite attention to what's happening in my own sensorium, which has always been a fascination, maybe even a narcissistic fascination, a healthy narcissistic fascination. I think there is a healthy form of narcissism. But anyway, that's my spiel, and I'm really grateful to be here. And I hope we can, at the end of our conversation, maybe be open to the idea that we may find some patterns and find some patterns that connect each of us and here on this call and beyond, and the on-the-ground communities that we're members of and how we may serve them through this this convocation right here. So thank you.
I'm happy to go next. This is my first cafe, so I don't quite know what the etiquette is, but I'll just share what I've been.
There's no etiquette, Mateo.
There's always a what I guess what I mean. There's always an unspoken Zoom etiquette, mute while you're not talking and not interrupting people and stuff like that.
That's the simplest, rule, yeah. I guess, is just when you want to speak, unmute, and that signals to others that you have something to say.
But sometimes we all unmute, just so we can hear one another laugh. That's very important. If you say something you think it's funny and there's nothing, and everyone's muted, it's kind of spooky. so I'm going to break that rule on occasion. Thanks. Glad to hear Mateo. Thank you.
And I'm fully interruptible. I don't mind at all. It's really lovely to be with you all. TJ, it's lovely to see your face. I've definitely seen your writing before and your photo, and Michael also. Yeah, it's nice to see people in motion. Yeah, wow, Marco, what I'm glad we're recording it. You could transcribe that introduction and write it down. That scope was vast. I appreciated that. Yeah. And Johnny, yeah, I've experienced a lot of death of friends that are close to me. I'm not freaking out right now either. I'm in euphoria also. I'm seeing a lot of beauty around me. I walk my dogs at the same time every day in this mountain road neighborhood, and I see the same people every day. And now I'm seeing 24 more people that are out walking, and people are talking with each other, keeping their distance. And there's a heart exchange going on. I think in the isolation, people are like, wow, we're going slow. And I'm having a lot of deeper conversations with people, all centered around this thing. I'm curious how things are going to play out. It seems to me like the honest buzzword of the day is I don't know, and I really, really like that. Like I really, really do, because I in mental consciousness, I see we spend a lot of time going around saying I know. Right, there's that. What am I thinking of? Kurt Vonnegut Jr. in Cat's Cradle, a little aphorism. Tiger got to hunt, bird got to fly, man got to sit and wonder why. Tiger got to eat, bird got to land, man got to tell himself he understand. It's like the shadow of mental consciousness is convincing ourselves that we know. And there seems to be this silence and understanding right now. The dolphins returning to bays and ports that are now clean. The air in China all of a sudden clean. Like we're getting this glimpse of almost instantaneous, relatively speaking, instantaneous biofeedback from the earth. And oh my God, to me, it's like I said to, our friend Florian in Germany. Germany's going through some stuff. And we were talking today, and we were talking about it being like, we meet every Friday looking at Sot Prem's Mind of the Cells. If you know the book, it's lovely. And we both were talking about it being like World War III, but not that many people are going to die. I mean, we don't know. I don't want to make any predictive statements about anything, but in a legitimate nuclear holocaust, there's going to be billions of people that die, and this will be very small in comparison. And it's like nature's giving us some feedback in a way that it seems to me like there is a lot of potential and a lot of I haven't seen it yet, but on Democracy Now! Today there's stories about nonprofits forming around human cohesiveness and doing a lot more than electoral politics to make our way through the next steps. It's really, I just feel like I'm seeing beautiful thing after beautiful thing. And yeah, it's not like I don't know fear. It's not like I don't know panic. I can sense that. And I too am spending a lot of precious time with dear friends and being with them through different levels of panic. And to me, it's simply more beautiful connectedness. Yeah. Anyway, love. I could say more, but I'll just stop there. Lovely being here and lovely seeing you all.
I like
Thank
that,
you,
Mateo.
Mateo. That was beautiful.
Yeah.
Doug, your scenery changed.
Getting
Now
windy and cold. No, I'm in a greenhouse.
It looks like you're in an
Feels great.
airplane.
You're in a greenhouse? That's appropriate.
Yeah, I like I said, I don't have appropriate spaces, but I'll make do with what I have.
No, that's a good backdrop.
I'm with the plants. This is great. They speak too, don't they?
Yeah, yeah. So maybe we'll be collectively able to listen. I love how you phrase that, Mateo. And John, also, you put that on the forum. It's very interesting how, and I hope this comes out the right way, how unimportant we are. in the natural scheme of things, you know, if it only took a few days for some of these things to kind of bounce back, you know, how important are we? How important is it that we continue this model of growth as if, you know, we have the resources of 6 Earths? It doesn't make any sense. So this is another. It's like all crises. It's like all times when you have a mutation between one structure of consciousness to another. It's going to be a time of pain, and it's going to be an opportunity for growth. And a lot of the reaction, it's I guess it's not as weird as it is. It's uncanny how individual the reaction is, and how much it depends on kind of the way that the experiences you've had, and how you even develop a reaction to these things, and whether your response is primarily optimistic or primarily pessimistic, or whether you're fear mongering, or whether you're hoarding up toilet paper, or whether you're, you know, trying to start up. I was shocked at how soft this paper was when it came in the mail. I can't hear anybody laughing with me, so I'll just.
Is that your stock options report?
Yeah, it was a report, but the paper was really, really soft. I mean, you don't see it just like, you know, crumble like this.
Right, that's something
nice,
new, right?
Nice texture.
You're primed to notice it.
I guess so, right?
Trevor Noah made some jokes about that. He said, because he comes from South Africa, and he says, first world people are so crazy. They freak out about not having toilet paper, but you're sitting right next to a shower, you know, or a tub or a faucet, you know. So I think that's true. I think it's very funny how our environments suddenly pop out at us. Certain features of our environments that have always been there, all of a sudden pop out.
They're
in
in your awareness.
Because we're scanning differently. We're scanning our environments in very subtle, sometimes very dramatic different ways. Like, how close is that person getting to me? You know, people freak out now if you get too close. And, you know, that I'm not afraid of that, but other people are. And I think I mentioned this previously, that I want to respect other people's fear. And that's very important right now, to sort of learn what the new rules are, because I'm not sure, you know, if I'm breaking a rule.
I think that's real interesting how the positive coming out of social distancing, I think, is learning how to respect other people's fear. And here in Riverside, they've shut down downtown, and they let the restaurants stay open to no more than 10 people and to-go orders. In my favorite coffee shop, I went down to check in, and I don't have to worry about social distancing. It's a ghost town. There's hardly nobody that, you know, it's really kind of an interesting kind of reversal and stuff. And yet I had family and friends, because of my age, really concerned, well, you got to stay home. And with all due respect and put forward understanding their concern, I just don't work that way, because I've been practicing social distancing in many across the spectrum, especially psychologically, for 20 years, since I went through a traumatic event. I was forced to kind of bring that concept, that tool forward, and how to use it in a time of crisis. So it is a precious moment. It's interesting. I agree with Mateo and John. I was trying to write something, and one of the phrases that came up was, in the heat of this, there's a certain at easeness, probably because I've been through so many crises. I'm going, damn, I'm used to this shit. Come on, let's get it together. You know.
So are there any changes that y'all are making in your personal lives? You know, not just in you know, out of respect for others and, you know, how they might want to interact, but just because you believe that it's the right thing to do, or that it's a preference that you want to express. Like, how are you changing? And this could be at the spiritual level, like noticing the beauty, taking more time to, you know, have a conversation you wouldn't otherwise have, or hug your kids like extra tight, or whatever it is. Or it could be on the more practical, around getting around, going out. Like, what is changing for you in your lives, like in concrete terms?
Well, what's interesting, Marco, if I can put it this way, I know that we kind of throw this word around, but an integral approach that brings together multiple things, you know, the practical and the spiritual. My concentration and change has been to actually feel the wholeness, if I can put it that way. Feel that even though I agree that I'm kind of insignificant in a way in terms of Mother Nature, but I'm a whole part. Her wholeness feeds me, if that makes sense. The wholeness of the earth feeds me in this moment.
I love that. Thank you, Michael. Oh, but also Doug, did you give us you gave us a beautiful dream. I hope sometime during this conversation we can give some attention to that. That's my personal preference. You may not want to do that, but I really enjoyed your sharing that on the forum. Thank you.
I'm on the phone, so I have to scroll across a couple pages here to make sure nobody else is desiring to speak. But an answer to Marco's question, which much of what everyone is saying confirms my point of view that it's okay to be calm. It's okay to feel calm, which there's not been any panic. The largest panic was not toilet paper for us. It was we have 3 Asians in the house from the Philippines, and rice was missing. And that's a staple for meals. So learning how to survive without rice, we have to get creative with meals. The past year since they've been living here, my in-laws, it's been about 95% rice. But they've told me stories. Rain told me stories of she was growing up with literally handfuls of rice for meals. They would catch frogs in the field. They have one spigot of water for the entire village of what's now maybe 300 people. And I just remember the collective, sure there were arguments, and at night you could hear domestic fights because everybody's very close. It's not enclosed homes, they're huts or makeshift concrete abodes. But there was this community, whether you wanted it or not, and there was a connection to the land, or there still is. And so if you don't have food, you can go to your neighbors, you can take care of that. And here everything is just a little bit different. we worry about, or there's a chance to worry about so much, when really we have so much to be thankful for. We have even a simple meal. If we're worried about the grocery stores shutting down, the world completely coming to a halt, we're talking about going slow and distancing each other. The ultimate form of that, at least in our experience, might be we're holed in, no outside contact. Perhaps the power goes out, so we can't have these conversations. We would still be able to survive for quite a while, and then we'll see what happens after that. But there's so many of us that don't have those resources. But throughout all of this, personally, there's nothing that I've had to change. There's nothing that we have had to change other than the changes in work. But I've been reminded of many personal goals I've set for myself in the past. My son just entered kindergarten, and I had thoughts of homeschooling, or he's at home now, and now I have a chance to actually experience that because I can work from home. So I'm thinking a little bit more long term. Can I revolt as I've been doing undercover for 2 or 3 years, helping out with things on the side that I like my Quaker group, like the group here, which if I had my own business, that'd be great. I could run that, but I have to work undercover because of the unspoken rules that you have to look busy at work and do this or that. So now we're working from home, and not too much is changing that we couldn't necessarily do that. And there's a lot of these unspoken rules. I think a few of us posted things online that spoke similar words to that. And it's not just work, it's the education system at large, it's government at large, it's all these larger changes that as an individual, I do feel these potentials. I do feel I'm not a pessimist, and I'm typically an optimist, but at the same time, once we do hit that point where, okay, it's business as usual, I'm a bit pessimistic. I think maybe I side with Ed, who tends to think that people as a collective will not be able to commit to the greater good. It takes little pods like us, we've noticed, and the individual to. So I'm wondering, what can I possibly do in the long run to make the changes? So right now, no changes. So, but it's a reminder of these greater changes that are possible, and underlying all that, there is this strange force, as Marco mentioned, as John mentioned, as others have mentioned, that kind of guides us along, whether it's nature or some occult power that's driving us towards some alternate existence, I guess, and it speaks to us in different ways.
I just want to bring a specific, to answer Marco's question, how one specific change that has come front and center for me, especially around people I care about, is the willingness to speak what I need from them without being demanding, using nonviolent language, request what I need from them, and give voice to the need, because I've been raised in such a way that giving voice to what you need can appear needy and lack self-sufficiency. And I think with that, it also has tenderized my heart of how to listen to other people's needs, even if they're not voicing them. You know, there's a subtext. So that's one specific thing in terms of my practice and focus of my attention of that movement of, well, what do we need from each other right now? And thank you all, because this is very helpful for me.
I'm enjoying not being on the New Jersey Turnpike so much. Where a texting driver could do as thorough a job and quicker than any strain of flu. So it's been good. I get that half an hour back. It's been interesting. Just kind of interacting with my kid. Well, one kid's an adult now. He's 18. He's driving. The other one is 13, so he's in 8th grade, and kind of how they've had to adjust to the new schedule. But just kind of being able to kind of walk. Oh yeah, Daddy's on his computer too, and we're kind of walking through it together has been interesting. Like Doug, no real substantive changes. But we'll see. We'll see what comes down the pike.
I just want to pick up on that a little bit. What wants to live? and what wants to die. If you've ever worked with someone suicidal, it's not a good idea to tell them they have a lot to live for. You really want to drive them, make them jump out the window, tell them all the things. I speak from personal experience because of my family history here. But I think it is a very useful proposition or complementary to say, okay, you're suicidal. What wants to live? Something must want to live, or you would have suicided already. And what wants to die? And I think that's so, it's not something you should just, it comes in handy if you're working with someone who's suicidal, but I think we live in a very, our whole culture is suicidal, has been for a very long time. And people are running around, keeping busy and drugging themselves or drinking too much or shopping too much or doing something way too much, having sex too much, whatever it is, to, distract themselves from the fact that, we all know how this is going to end already, and it's not going to be pretty. But I would say it's not going to be the end of the world. It's going to be the end of a world. And I'm reminded of, and I welcome that. Let's get on with this. I've been praying to God, beam me up. If I have to stay here any longer, I'll just go crazy. And but you sort of have to tone it down and put a lid on it and function in a very insane system. And we're running out of gas. We've been running out of gas for 40 years. There have been people telling us, if we keep this up, it's not going to, we're going to run out of oil. And also we're going to, we can't treat the Middle East like it's going to be a bloodbath. Well, the bloodbath is here. And, and we're running out of toilet paper. People are hoarding it. But I'm just saying that I'm very poignantly remembering a movie, a Hitchcock film. I can't remember the name of it, but it's about this small town girl. She's a young woman. She has a charming little family in a very small town where everybody knows each other and everybody greets each other. And then her uncle, who's a big city slicker kind of guy, he comes to visit. And her mother, this is her younger brother, and she adores him. So the movie, if you haven't seen it, she finds out through piecing things together about his that he has a secret life, and that she begins to suspect that he's a serial killer, and he's come back to visit because he needs a place to hang out because he's undercover, and they're looking for him. But the wonderful thing, I remember looking at a Hitchcock talking about this character, and he says she discovers that her world is not the world. There's another world behind the cozy little family village, and she, through her psychotic, crazy uncle, is connected to that. And I think this is sort of what's happening. Strangely enough, I also see glimpses of another world. And we, FEAR, forever evading another reality. Many, many of us, probably the vast majority of us, are stuck in that and are defending and hunkering down around the status quo. But I think that's going to be swept away very quickly. And I'm not and I don't want to be pessimistic or doomsayer or underestimate, how devastating it will be to myself and to others, I think, to see, precious loved ones swept away by this. But I think it's, I think that there's Richard Moss, he's a medical doctor. I studied energy sharing with him back in the 80s, and meditation. He was a very interesting fellow, and he said that the AIDS epidemic was uplifting the gay community.
sorry, you broke up. The what was uplifting? I didn't hear it.
I'm sorry, am I breaking up?
I heard you okay, so it might have been
Yeah,
on Mateo's
it's
end.
the AIDS epidemic, he said, is uplifting the gay community. And that really sort of offended me at the time. My ego did not like that response. But now 40 years later, I can look back on it and I knew where he was coming from even then. And I realized that if that's true of the gay community and the learnings that we had were horrible. I mean, it was a terrible thing that we had to learn it that way, but that we did learn and we organized and we reorganized and we changed our behavior and we took care of people and we created institutions and we got politically involved and we learned how to triangulate from the margins and we've had an impact. And I believe that that's some of the thinkers that we've studied together. I can't remember his name now. He's an ecologist, but he was looking at the gay movement as a model for what he thought needed to happen globally. So I take that to heart. And so I come often to these sessions with the intention to create conditions for that possibility that we can start to reorganize. And I think it starts in these small world networks such as this. I don't think it's going to happen. The WTO or the International Monetary Fund or the United Nations or the US Congress. I don't think it's going to be a top-down delivery system. There is no savior. I think, though, that these small world networks are spaces where we can start to experiment and open up our imagination. And how are there other ways of getting satisfaction in our relationships than, you know, going out and spending $200 to have dinner and watch a Broadway show? I mean, give me a break. I mean, those are the kinds of things that they're doing in New York that I think are incredibly sterile. And so much of the arts, which I came here because I love the arts, I love the theater, has become such a cesspool for, you know, these really shoddy, shallow values. And the writing is terrible, the acting sucks, it's very, very expensive, and it's driven largely by status. Millionaires who can afford a $500 ticket. And I'm not exaggerating. There was a show I wanted to see and I found out orchestra seats were like $500. I went, oh, please. So those are the kind of things that I hope will die. And I hope we can flush it down the toilet so that the whole idea of the amateur rather than the professional could start coming forward in these small world networks so that we can write poetry for love, we can write a play, we could recite Shakespeare to one another, we can, you know, work with a very complicated theory that we're trying to figure out. We can do these little small world kind of experiments. And I don't think they have to scale up. I think that's the trap, as Bonnie Roy says. If we don't do these small experiments because they're fun to do. You know, they're intrinsically enjoyable and driven by our need for aesthetic relationships. And it doesn't have to scale up. The UN and the WTO are not going to figure this one out for us. But I think that we'll go back into our communities and work locally, and we can work here as well. And, you know, once again, create conditions, because we cannot cause transformation, but we can, I believe, create conditions for that possibility through our intention, our attention, our ability to center, to work with complements, and to deal with the, you know, inevitable tensions and stresses, because we have personalities and we have egos, let's face it. But I think it's really wonderful that we've gotten together and spent many, many hours working with Sloterdijk, working with Aurobindo, working with Gebser. This is really heavy lifting. And I think it's quite amazing that we kept it going. So thank you.
Something that Michael said, I can't even rephrase it, but it was like a mirror about empathy and being more present with needs and things like that. This is, I think it's the coronavirus. There's a number of things going on though personally, but this is what's extremely present in my deepest relationship with my sweetie. And it was nice to hear that. I completely resonated with that. Thank you. And yeah, there are some changes, right? I haven't had a hug from someone in a little while. I'm here all alone. My dogs are getting a little more accosted. Thank goodness they're big dogs, and when they walk by me, I can give them bear hugs. And they're like, "What's going on here?" But they're fine with it. I'm happy to be living here with them. I guess the way that I can think about measuring the type of transformative change, logistical change is, it's too soon to tell really. We're like yeah, TJ said that too. We're day whatever of what's it called? Shelter in place rule in California anyway. I'm sure you all will have it if you don't have it quite yet. But Gavin Newsom our county did it 4 days ago, and Gavin Newsom just did it statewide yesterday. So that's where California is at right now. I think that there was a statistician biologist from Johns Hopkins that was hired and came out with a study that said that regardless of what we do, 56, even if we all stay at home, 56% of Californians will get it. I don't know about all that stuff. I think the whether or not we are living off of a handful of rice a day and I'll be looking for squirrels in the trees. Whether we go that route, it's just too soon to tell. So I guess my matrix right now are my practice, and there's all sorts of. There's all sorts of metrics that I can sense into. Consecration, concentration, developing more inner peace, empathy, practicing generosity. I think in some ways I'm kind of seeing all of these things just like slightly increase in myself and I think in others around me too. I don't know. There's a lot of people in Santa Cruz that I would say identify as having a spiritual practice, and there's probably a lot of these same matrix in all the myriad spiritual practices that people engage in, and it feels to me like that's like in a real way that's on a rise. And I think the deeper the crisis gets, the more people pull together. That's what I've seen all the time. I don't care about toilet paper. The real thing that I bought, the only thing that I could think that would actually be significant is Robitussin DM, because it will help suppress a cough. And there's not a run on it yet. And so I bought 3 small bottles, not for myself. I kind of bought it for friends. I didn't want to go crazy and buy 30 bottles. And I'm so happy that eBay and Amazon stepped up in a small way to shut down that draconian capitalism of the toilet paper hoarders and the mask hoarders that are trying to resell them for gross profits. There's some good signs there. And then there's some laughable things to the CEO of Whole Foods telling employees that they could donate their vacation hours. I mean, fuck off. There's some things that are just like, wow. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going through with all this that's going on. I'm definitely going through some reactionary, like, I'm going through some reactionary things, which is also kind of fun. I can't say that I don't enjoy it. There's some interesting things going on right now.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. That's so ridiculous. Jeff Bezos, isn't he the head of
He
Whole Foods
owns
and
it,
Amazon?
but it was the CEO. Who knows what his name
Yeah,
is.
one of the richest people in the world telling his employees they need to donate their vacation time to their sick employees rather than paying anyone overtime. So I find that sad, but kind of amusing too, how shameless these people are. I mean, I've worked for very rich people, and I worked on Fifth Avenue, and for a very wealthy man, and he had a gold toilet bowl, and the butler instructed me, because I was the house cleaner, and how to clean it. He says, you don't use any bleach, you don't use anything on it, you just wipe it down because it's gold. Gold. He shits in a gold toilet bowl. And I was very amused as I went by his bed. He had a book, and the name of the book was The Myth of Rent Control. So it's obviously one of these Martin Friedman kind of libertarian freaks who thought the social net was spoiling people. The Myth of Rent Control, and he shits in a gold toilet bowl. I think there's a poem there, maybe a really bad poem, but I heard a bit of a rhyme. But I think there's some, I think this was a number of years ago, but I see that kind of, because I live in New York, and I see the kind of grotesque inequalities. And I could get rageful about it, or I could get amused by it, or I can sort of get detached. But if it's the end of their world, I will jump for joy. I think they've really, I think their world is crumbling, and I think they're panicking, and I think I don't know what's going to replace it, but I think it's becoming abundantly clear now, because of this pandemic, that this is not an academic question. What happens after capitalism? I think there are a lot of people now that are holding that question in ways that they didn't before. So I think we'll see what happens next. I'm not sure, but I am. I have a question here, but I'm waiting for it to get more concrete in my mind before I take up any more of your time. Anyway, thank you.
Well, I have a smattering of thoughts. These are loose ends which might cohere into something that is more concrete. For the record, I am trying to avoid getting sick. I actually don't want to get the virus. I don't want to pass it on. I don't want my family to get it. The odds are I may, especially if 2/3 of the population, some estimates have it, do become infected. And it's all a kind of probabilities game, it seems. And whether or not it's mild or severe has to do with underlying conditions and yada, yada. And I am very invested in the health of my family and my own. I work hard on it, actually. I mean, I'm not a health freak or a health nut. I was much more so when I was younger. But I take seriously the possible, some of the more negative possible outcomes to all this. And I think that if we look just from a practical perspective and like look at a geopolitical sort of lens and how different countries and different approaches have dealt with the situation and what the outcomes were, I think that that's an interesting thing because we, clearly unprepared for what's coming. And one thing about this virus that I understand just on the factual basis is that the number of reported cases or official cases is not the same as the number of true cases. And it is like a wave. So when you have a few hundred or a few thousand reported cases, that means that there's a much bigger wave of unreported cases that's coming up behind it. And in a matter of days, weeks, becomes manifest. And so I think we're in a moment now, which is kind of like before the tsunami hits. Like we've been disrupted, we see it coming. And the social body, the social organism has become alerted to this and is beginning to react and to brace itself. But we're seeing differences in how different groupings at the national, regional, local levels are handling that, and how different personality types or different mentalities are reacting to that. Now, I think it's interesting. I don't know what this means, but I think it's interesting that China has, in the Wuhan province and in other provinces, managed to contain the spread, the virus at this time, and now it's growing in other countries: Italy, France, Spain, Sweden, the United States. But they reacted to it, if at first with some deceit, or with some like not facing it, or in non-transparency. They then reacted very aggressively and brought to bear the authoritarian surveillance state, to really lock down these places and prevent the spread and suppress, that curve of infection. And they could do that because their system is set up that way. And now in Western countries like the United States, European countries, and others, because we have more, quote, open societies, we don't have that centralized power to do. So this could be much more of a debacle. It could become, much more of a disaster than, what we've seen so far. So that's like one scenario I think that, I take seriously, because I'm responsible to other people. I'm responsible to my family and to my community. And I prefer to have a better outcome rather than a worse one, even though ultimately we're all dying. And this is part of a larger transformation, which I think is positive. And I also feel a deep kind of calm and like non-surprise, kind of, you said euphoria, John, and so I've verged towards that. I haven't been dancing in the streets, but I feel that now it's an opportunity. Like this is actually favorable conditions for the kind of thing that I want to do. Like almost everybody is forced into a spiritual retreat now. Like we're all monks and nuns, at least, whether unwillingly or not, there's a spiritual turn, and not everyone's going to do it. Some people are just going to zone out and do Netflix all day, or workaholic, become even worse, workaholics. But I think the conditions are favorable when people are more mindful. Like there's a mindfulness now that is becoming required, and when they're more contemplative, when they're more in a attunement, with being, rather than in a sort of flight from it. I think that there was so much noise, and we were overheating as a civilization as well. We were doing so many stupid things, so many pointless things, expending gargantuan amounts of energy, and to just stop for a little while, I find refreshing. Like chill out, go home, take a break, think about your life for a little while, think about the things that are important to you, who you love, what's really worth, your precious life energy. And I think some good could come of that actually, and the atmosphere is more conducive to, I think, noticing what is beautiful about being. That's something I really appreciated about what you shared, Matteo, is that, and this is, like you said, just a few days in, so, but you already notice that you notice that you're noticing beauty more. And I think people noticing beauty more in general is a wonderful thing. Like, that's favorable to my purposes and my objectives and what I feel like I'm here on this earth to do. So in a way, it's like a catalyst, and it's like a signal to, okay, now it's time to really step into like get into gear, like shift, upshift, or downshift. I don't have the right metaphor exactly, but it's like a signal, like, and it's not the last signal, it's not the first signal, and it's not the only crisis. And this is part of a serial crisis. It's just one wave of more calamities to come, which are going to have this, like, a reverse shadow, like the light side of it. Like a lot of good things have a darker shadow. This is a bad thing that has a light shadow. And I think that these light shadows become like revelatory potentials. Like, they become moments when there could be more of a revelation of the of that world behind the world that you're preoccupied with all the time and that you think is real. And so I wouldn't, I'm sharing this perspective and these, with all of you here and whoever's watching this. It's not what I would say in the grocery store necessarily, but it might be. Like, it might be that, and we might just have like the opening that we wouldn't otherwise have to have an ontological conversation. And to indulge a little bit more in like the things that I care about, which are not the stock market, they're not the the economy, and they're not like a lot of things that are predominantly blasted as being the most important things like that are going on. What's happening with my mother is very important. What's happening with my daughters, with the birds that I'm suddenly hearing in the trees in the morning, like, that's new. That's very nice and interesting, and it's news. It's like news of the universe. I think there's a compilation I have here by Robert Bly called News of the Universe. To me, this is an opening that allows some more of that news to get through. And just to tie back with the China thing, because they've demonstrated a model that works for virus suppression, I do worry that kind of sets the conditions where more centralized, more like top-down, more authoritarian tendencies could come in and want to kind of replicate that and use this moment for consolidating a power that is intended to keep people safe, but ends up being like even more oppressive. Like, I think that there is the possibility and the potential for a more communitarian type of outcome where we recognize that we are all in this together, that we have a stake in a common framework for human health and flourishing and ecological balance, and all the rest of like the good positive ideas that are just waiting for a moment to be brought to be implemented. But I think it will take people like us speaking up and saying what we want to have happen, and many people making that alternate will apparent, and not shying away from the radical opening that this moment is or can be. So those are just some thoughts, just riffing. And again, I want to reflect
Marco,
back how.
can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Because the way you were speaking, it made me feel that it's like there's a new sense of polarity being birthed out of this hyper polarization. It's like, you know, we're trying to break through. We've been hyper polarized, but the way you were talking about the golden shadows, and so it's developing a new relationship to the sense of polarity, of difference that we all share in the communal humanity that we share. So I guess my question is, how would you view this, what I'm asking about polarity and how we're working with it?
That's a good question. I mean, the polarity that I think is most salient, at least for me, is that between the self and world, or self and others.
Okay.
And I think that that's because when something in the world threatens you, when it gets close,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it animates, it like activates that
Right,
sense
right,
of
right,
that
exactly.
sense of difference, that sense of division. Like all this that's happening, coronavirus, climate crisis, all that, it's not in the world out there. It's in the world in here.
Mm-hmm.
It's a world of our conscious making.
Mm.
And I think the default mode of our minds is to polarize between the self and the world, and the self and the other. But what happens when an event like this, a liminal event, comes and activates, accelerates like that sense of division, is that it becomes unstable.
Right.
And it allows there to be a felt experience of the prior entanglement or the prior yin yang of those perceptions. So to me, this is back to the microcosm and the macrocosm.
Mm-hmm.
In a way, we're manifesting this. In a way, this is part of the story of who we are playing itself out, and it's already unfolding, like it's being written. This is the question that I would want to get to through this meeting, because I listed a few. John asked if I can zero in on one, but the question that I'm most curious about is what is the relationship between coronavirus and God?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so,
I'm going to go, I don't know. I don't know. Because they're both so vast to me right now in the felt experience.
I could ask you a few questions, but they probably wouldn't be fair. Like, God, is there anything else about God?
Yeah, I was going to
What
say
kind
we're
of
in the
God?
definitions game now, right?
Whereabouts is God? I don't think that's trivial. I think it's actually very important. And Corona, whereabouts is Corona? Does Corona have a size or shape? Can you locate Corona? I can. And I wrote a poem about it. And it was in response actually to a poem that you wrote. And I think there's, I was listening to the Weird Studies podcast, and they were talking about James Hillman on dreams. And I thought it was fascinating. But I think there's something that they said that really triggered, they said they were talking about doing away with art criticism. Most people don't need art criticism anyway. They just go enjoy art or don't enjoy it, but they don't have to have criticism. But there's some people who are obsessed by critique. And I think I want to sort of end that. Because if an artwork, if it moves me, I need to respond with another artwork. And I think that would be to do away with criticism and the function of the critic. Because I think that's been overplayed and stopped people from creating or responding to art because they feel like, oh, I'm no good at this. I don't know how to draw. I don't know how to dance. I don't know how to sing. Let some expert explain this this literature that I just read, this piece of work. I think that's all bullshit. I think we've all comes out of this backstreet model education we've all been tormented by. So I have a, so I wrote my exercising Corona as a sort of meditation upon my own mortality and my own fascination with this character, Corona. And at the end of it, she started out as a mystery, and at the end of it, she sort of feels like someone that I know very well. And I ended, my last line was, "Oh, my Corona," you know. So I think it's a strange kind of love affair, but I know where she is. I know where my lungs are. My lungs have a size or a shape. My lungs have an intention. My lungs have desire. And Corona, whereabouts is Corona? I felt her around, she was sort of like right around here. She was really black, like a, sort of like a tornado. It was right above my head, really, and she's spinning. And I could feel lots of static electricity, you know, like tornadoes, you see the bolts of lightning. And, but she sort of, as I sort of asked silly questions of myself and about this relationship, this became a she. It became personified and very much femme fatale kind of energy and sexy. And she hissed, "Your magic will not save you." And I felt, oh, there's a personality here. But I can sort of, but I'm, it's a question of scale. And I believe I'm entering into a human, the human scale, you know. Otherwise, it's just this weird virus that everyone's freaking out about. But if we can name it and kind of bless it in a weird kind of way, it no longer becomes a hungry ghost that's out to get us. But you know, the virus wants to live too, and they don't have the equipment that we do, so they mimic our DNA, and they trick us so that they can have a place to stay. Temporary, and they don't kill the whole species. That wouldn't be in their interest, because then there would be no more hosts for them. So I think this is a very deep paradox. And I understand we all want to find a pill, we want to cut it out, nuke it, shoot it, get rid of it. And I think there's a place for that. And I certainly don't say we should go out and expose ourselves intentionally to the virus. But at the same time, we've already, most of us have probably been exposed already. And the whole idea of quarantine is a very limited value. And you know, I think the Chinese may discover, sadly, that those that they quarantined who were not exposed to this, now that they've released the quarantine, there may be another strain of corona that they are not going to be immune to. There's something about the herding instinct, the herd that holds, that stabilizes the spread of a virus, because those that survive it, and which will be most of us probably, will stabilize our immune system, our collective immune system. This is why if someone's doing a lot of antibiotics, I never take antibiotics except occasion when they're because of emergencies, but there are over-prescribing antibiotics have changed the microbial world so that the microbial world strikes back with a vengeance. It doesn't go away, it goes underground and it mutates and it comes back. And now we have, of course, strains of certain bacteria and viruses that we don't have immunity to, nor do we have any drugs that are strong enough because they've mutated so quickly. And I think this is the dilemma that we're in. I think it's a dilemma, and I don't think I'm not under, God forbid, you know, I think you should protect yourself and protect others from exposure to this, especially if you have some underlying condition. But I don't think it matters much anymore, because I think everybody's pretty much been exposed. Um, and I also say, well, if this is the death space, I think we should avoid it for as long as possible. But if the death space is here, embrace it, because what's on the other side of it may be very worthwhile. And then when I say dead space, I'm talking about there's simple, there's complicated, there's complex, and then there's chaos. And when we have a chaotic system, it will find order. Chaos doesn't last long, but while it lasts, it's pretty scary. And I think the best thing to do is just, fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy ride, but try to enjoy it if you can. And I'll just also, I had this, I had a real soft, fuzzy feeling. I went to Whole Foods and I did my shopping. I had to wait outside, for a while, not too long, but I got inside. I did my shopping and I just look at the workers there. I think I'm going to cry because, all those people that are working behind the counters and, sweeping the floors and restocking the shelves, and they're there and they're on the front line and they're being exposed, and some of them making just maybe above the minimum wage, but they should be getting a whole lot more than they're getting now. That's for sure. And you hear some asshole CEO says they should give up their vacation time to take care of their sick employees. That's obscene. That's very obscene. And so I'm looking at these mostly young people. There are a few middle-aged and some elderly people working at the cashier register. You're lining up, and I'm just finding myself, I think I'm going to cry. So embarrassing when that kind of thing happens. But I just I had to stifle it, put a lid on it, because I just wanted to shout, you people are beautiful. You're just so gorgeous. You're like angelic beings.
Yes.
And you don't know it, but you are. You're just hardworking, and you're doing what you're told, and you have a boss that's mean to you, and you have family you have to take care of, so you're showing up for this. But I think that's sort of a gift to me, because I'm gonna, if we make it through this and the quarantine is lifted, and I don't think I'm not going to go back to business as usual, but some people might try. But I have a funny feeling that this is a kind of initiation, that we're all entering into a near-death experience collectively. And this has been true for individuals and for small communities, even for some large communities. But now that we're living in this global world where everything's connected, everyone is going through this at the same time. And that's sort of shamanic, I think, and to be welcomed. So thanks.
From my work with my own trauma, one of the things, like my landlord had a moment on Monday of panic with me, and I was grateful for my long practice of how our nervous systems sync. There's neurobiology, that's a fact, and that ties into the mental. It's all one whole package, but we tend to just want to focus. The mental tends to want to compartmentalize, which that's a fucking joke. We all know that, but it's important. Mental is important, because I wouldn't have been able to do it without the mental, to just be there with his moment of panic and trying to infer that I was a social butterfly and I had no respect for what was going on. But I found it, John, I found it very similar to yours, is just the gift of that moment to show myself that I could work with somebody that is agitated and responding differently than me. And I don't know any other way to phrase it. I'm not going to use that mental word, but wholeness. Wholeness feels better to me than that other mental word that we use a lot. You guys all know that word, integral.
Integral?
Yeah, integral, that mental.
Integral,
integral, yeah. So I prefer wholeness, because my body's whole, the earth is whole, integral is too, I understand the value of it. It's just, maybe I have a bias against
I-
over-utilizing.
Ironically, Michael, it comes from Purna in Sanskrit, which means complete. So
Oh, wow, wow,
it's translated as integral, and it has been, but many people translate it as complete. Purna.
oh, wow.
Purnamadam, Purnamidam, Purnamudachate. It's that is complete. This is complete. Yeah.
That's nice to know, Matteo. That's nice to know. Because, as much as I appreciate that mathematical representation of integral, that I think that's one of the things we've talked in terms of Gebser pointing out, that it's overemphasized and it's deficient. It has a deficiency in it, the way it's being applied. I don't think he's trying to give it up. It's just the application. So, yeah, because I take every opportunity. This is one of the things that I find too, every opportunity to get people to talk about their nervous systems and what's happening in their nervous systems, to bring in terms of how their nervous system is feeding their mental, and that. So that's one thing I'm really being sensitive to, and it's you got to have your feet on the ground when you're talking to the person, if you can use that kind of language, because some people, you can tell they're not going to be responsive. So thank you.
I was going to retreat from Marco's question about how coronavirus relates to God. Not going to go there. I don't know the mind of God. But I do, as you all well know, I'm looking at the big history picture. What was the Black Plague's role in history, in the West, in the world history? What is coronavirus's potential place in the development of society going forward from this? Will we learn the lessons? I'm thinking of Hurricane Sandy and how that kind of just shut down everything on a grand scale here in New York and New Jersey, and how everybody was kind of rebuilding community because you didn't have electricity, so you hang out with each other. We played cards. So my kids had to gamble with pennies and stuff in different card games. And then the power came on, and I'll never forget it. It was actually kind of funny because I'm walking back into my building and the power comes on. 5 minutes later, my kids are arguing over the remote control and who gets to watch what TV program, and I'm just like, no impact whatsoever. So two things, and kind of riffing off of what Marco had said before, we're going to value our local communities more. We're going to value our connections more, or we're going to open the door for a fascism that we haven't seen since the beginning of the last century. And it's kind of that weird place, and I've said it before too, historians were like, what happens next? I don't know. They'll give you a pair of dice and roll them, and they'll tell you. So those kind of things are playing in my mind, just kind of thinking long term. I too, would like to keep this away from the kids and the wife and the family. I too kind of think, well, if I'm going to get it, let's get the mild version. Let's go, get through it and everything without hoarding everything, we don't need. So I've got a lot of things, I don't have a clear theme here, but just kind of a lot of things that were bouncing around. Will we, but there's lessons to be learned here, definitely. And people went through 2008. I'm told, or the thing I just read, the economic damage has already surpassed that in a week and a half. What it took, to collapse in the former recession. So all these really interesting threads. I was reading another article today where red state and blue state are reacting to it differently. There's still the propaganda from either side, as to how to interpret it. And if, while blue states, where the coastal states are reacting differently because that's kind of the center of the tsunami right now. But then other people who haven't been as impacted yet, as Marco points out, 'cause this is probably like the first part of the bigger wave that's coming. I'm rambling now. Just there's a lot of different, I said before, there's a lot of different reactions to it, and it's going to kind of come out of people's experiences and where they are now. But is there something that we can grab onto here and focus it going forward and pull out of it in a positive way?
I think so. I think as I was just about we talked earlier, I got a chance to watch the video that we did on Monday on the axial age and the second axial age. And I thought it was an interesting discussion. I was a part of that discussion, but I forgot very rapidly what we talked about. But reviewing it was very interesting. I think that we talked about going meta and when do you go meta? And about meta history. We've talked about this, TJ, and I think this the study of the axial age brought our attention to this, of different practitioners or different teachers or different lineages go meta in very different ways. But I think there's something that each individual does, I know I do, when I go meta, is sometimes very useful, but sometimes it's also a way of escaping. And the cognitive trick that we use is to go into our maps. We have lots of them and they're all fascinating, or our models, and we want to skip what's happening below the, below the neck, the gut, the heart, the chest, all those weird sensations that we don't have labels for. And that's sort of why I said that I sort of wanted to go meta, but I said, no, don't go meta. Talk about how beautiful, the people in the store were today, because it makes me want to cry, but because they are so beautiful. And, I forget about how beautiful people are all the time. But I think sometimes I go meta instead of going into that, because sometimes the love is so overwhelming that I almost feel like I will be swept away. So I have to tone it down, put a lid on it. Don't go there, And, we're all guys, we know what that's like. Being socialized as men in this society is really about, going meta as much as you can and learning how to compete and fight and win and take it all, So I'm just looking at that tension. But I was wondering also, Marco is talking about, he wasn't interested in Wall Street. He wasn't interested in the money. But I think I know what Marco might be interested in. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you might be interested in the ontological status of the fifth dimension. And I'm speaking from one space cadet to another. But I think this is the time. Now is the time to figure out the ontological status of the fifth dimension. And this may not be the right time, Doug, but I think you are working with that, the fifth dimension, in your dream that you shared. It was very clear to me that you've moved from fourth dimension to fifth dimension. And I think that's something actually many of us are doing. We may not have the vocabulary for it yet, but I think the more opportunities we have to create these small world networks where you can talk seriously about the ontological status of the fifth dimension without people looking at you like you're from Mars. But these are very legitimate questions. And I think this is a useful way of going meta. And why I think we tracking our dreams or our fantasies or our the dramas in our daily lives, and being able to hold, go to a second order or third order, and be able to work with and our maps start to change as we tune into these affective zones. And it's very important that it all be working together. So anyway, that's my spiel. So Doug, take it away if you're ready for that. Michael too. If you have
I do have a poem that I wrote on the 18th, I guess that was 2 days ago. And I don't know fully what I was responding to. It's called On What You Can Do for Your Country, so it might have been in response to what I was reading at that time. And it's essentially what I talked about earlier, like what can I do as an individual? It goes back to what Marco was questioning, as there's this self and the world, and we're all saying, well, yeah, we can change, and we hope the world will change along with us, whether it likes it or not. It sounds like we're in the eye of the storm, and no matter what direction we go from that eye is going to be stepping into some sort of chaotic situation, at least for some time, unless we can mosey on along with the eye of the storm the whole way. But I think this poem answers the question about coronavirus and God, perhaps. So I'll read it if you guys will indulge me for a minute.
Go for it.
Please do.
I am there. I am there. I have searched for the right way, the right words, the right mindset. Here's the kicker here. Ontologies and ways to become our ontologies. I have not and cannot be what is needed, but I am what is needed. I am hibernation from the human contact, from the human. I am in this world, but will never be of this world. If the vibrant voices cannot be heard, it is true there is no utopian hope at large. Ground up consciousness. Into the ground I go down. Into the ground I go down. Ground up, compost, nutrient. A mere iota of a fact. I go down in history as nothing. Nothing said, nothing earned. We are not prepared, but I am prepared to give it all away. To the darkness, the hibernation, the human world will not change. There's that euphoria, perhaps. From the inside, yes. The outside, no. Inside I go. Inside we go. No light to reflect upon the mirrors of what we mind you. We go deeper and darker and seek no longer the light. I know my place. I will not persuade you to follow. It is my path alone, for me alone. I go alone and you will never follow. I will discover it all. I will know the earth. I will be consumed and resume life as it was in an alternate time. Nothing can stop me now. Then at the end, I say, do I need to share this point of view? But I believe we've all shared this point of view in this conversation here. So yeah, maybe it was something I was going to post to the forum, and I said, no, I don't know if I want to share this now. It's not, might not even make sense what I just read, but to me, it speaks to the social distancing. The idea of hibernation, I brought up a couple times in the past, but it goes back to a thought experiment that Jeffrey asked us to do for the globe conversation for Sloterdijk. Like what would be the next step that Sloterdijk takes? And I was thinking that, well, we would actually need a physical bubble, but not necessarily because of a virus. I was thinking more along the lines of environmental decline and global warming. We would literally we couldn't breathe the air, so we would need some sort of device to survive as a human. So it's some sort of science fiction fantasy I had going on there. But in a way, hibernation has also become the positive side of it, which is the meditative side, which involves dreaming and taking time out from the human world to actually give time to, yes, these are thoughts, but it's also beyond thoughts. I don't know if it's meta thoughts, but I'll think about that later. But getting past those thoughts that we think, to get to something beyond that, what if you want to call it the unconscious or whatever it might be. But those time, that time that we spend in that space is what matters to me, and I wish it mattered to more people to a certain extent. And I wish for it to be expressed. So there's multiple ways. Dreams and poems are great, but do what you do best. And I think we're all trying our best here. So I appreciate you all listening.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
Thank
Doug.
you, Doug.
Beautiful.
Can I go, John?
Go, Michael.
Because I got it's fresh in my my beanpole. You know, Doug said something about going meta, and I thought I heard in which direction, and I've always been confused about that word somewhat, because if I was to point my meta, it would be along the lines of Michael Meade, of giving permission to descent out of whatever perspective, to just go down, not necessarily up. I think in my experience of working with that particular way, which I know comes from my trauma, one thing I've found is kind of that Gebser talks, I'm reading the last part of EPO, and he talks about Athena coming out of the forehead of Zeus, and there's deliberate direction of thought, of being conscious of how we're using our thought, whatever way it's going, that we're free to work with the direction of thought. And what you just expressed, Doug, and your poem and stuff resonates a lot, because I feel that you were giving permission to move. The directionality was flexible, fluid. And I think that for me, that's more important than if I'm in a bubble or not. It's just, I'm kind of biased that way. I think I have a biased sensory to movement. So
that's lovely. I have that bias too towards movement. If it don't dance and sing, it don't mean a thing to me. I also wanted to ask a question, Doug, about the fifth lucid dream. You shared two dreams, and one was a sort of that it was the second dream that you shared, and I think you said it was your fifth lucid dream. I think there was a crowd, and there was a speaker, and she said, "Get closer." Could everyone get closer? And you instinctively thought that was a bad idea, so you stepped back at a distance from the crowd. And then I think that's when you became aware that you were in a dream. And am I correct?
That's a general technique to, at least within the dream, when something doesn't seem right, you work during the daytime to recognize, like, oh, well, that doesn't seem like it could be fully true. So you question during the day, and supposedly that trickles into your dreams at night. So that might have been how that arose.
And you looked at your hand, and you tried to put your finger through your hand, but that didn't work. Your hand was solid, but you tested it. So you were bringing your daytime memory and rehearsal into the dream space. And then something else happened. Was it a smartphone or something? Or there was something about a phone ringing, and you heard a voice?
Yeah, there was a ringing, and a phone appeared in my hand, and I guess it was kind of humorous. It said, what did it say?
Press 1.
If you're dreaming, press 1. And then I heard dial tone beeping off, and that awoke me soon after that.
And the voice, where?
Very interesting.
Where was the voice? Do you remember where the voice was? Was it inside? Was it outside?
since I often wear headphones and speaking on the phone, it was within this general area, so it was as if receiving a phone call, so in the head.
Was it a male voice or a female voice, or was there a gender that you were aware of?
It's like professional recording voice of a female. Press one.
That's interesting.
Voice there.
Thank you for sharing this. And I just have one question. And knowing what you know now about lucid dreams, what difference does knowing that make?
I don't know if anyone other than you, John, has experienced a lucid dream. I've been working on it for a few months now, and once you do experience it, you know it's a lucid dream. I had previously thought multiple times perhaps I had a lucid dream, but it feels completely real as I am talking to you now. So it literally is an alternate consciousness, an alternate reality. And I know that it's worth exploring.
And completely real, an alternate reality, and worth exploring. And what difference does knowing that make?
So without getting into too much detail or theory, we are bound to this world. We're bound to gravity. We're bound to the material, scientific output that this world, that's however you want to view it, as a representation or what the actual physical material world. We have in our day-to-day life, we cannot get out of that, except perhaps through daydreaming or imagination, and to tap into the possibility of retaining the body and consciousness to at some level, and being able to explore beyond. The possibilities are quite vast, but at the beginning stages, that's where I'm at. Not much else happens besides a phone appears in my hand and something like that. But
thank you very much. And I have a larger question, but I won't offer it now because I don't know we're running out of time, but maybe on the forum. And it's a relationship between all of that and Corona. I think there is something about, we're searching for an ontological status for the fifth dimension here. I think you've hit the jackpot. This is my projection. You'll forgive me. This isn't clean, but I think it's just good for me to know that I'm not the only weirdo who's having these experiences. It's so lonely when you're out there and you're thinking, wow, I'm having all these cosmic downloads. Is someone else doing this too? And there are lots of people having these experiences, but I feel like there's such a taboo about exploring them in a public space. And I think we're up against this public-private dynamic. And I believe we have to give permission for more people to feel safe about going into these liminal zones, because I think it's extremely important that we're able to articulate from these liminal zones something that is of use and value, as I believe you've demonstrated for us. I'm just going to quote Eliot: "You can have the experience and miss the meaning." And that's what's so awesome about, I think, our call tonight, is I think we are having the experience and we're not missing the meaning at all. We're making meaning together. We're making sense together. We're sharing attention together. We've been doing this since ancient times. And I think TJ and I we're working with David Loeffler, and that whole idea of sequence and going from the spear to the bow and arrow to the trap, that's a cognitive achievement, an amazing cognitive achievement. We can re-engineer or reverse engineer that, the cognitive development, but we already know the end of it. Those people, they did not know how this was going to end, you know, and I think that's fascinating how they pulled this off. But I think that our ancestors did pull this off, and that we're here, and that we can still, using this technology, create these kinds of sequences with our attention. We can create a joint attention and hold the space for one another, and to go into these exploratory and weird and liminal zones, just as I'm sure that whoever that was who thought about making a spear. A lot of people would say, oh, that's too weird. You know, we have other things to do, but there may have been someone who was just very driven to make this happen. So I think that's in our DNA, you know, and we share that, and as members of the same species. And so I think we're in a crisis point here, and I'm really suggesting that all the work that we've done has been to create conditions so that, you know, this underground work that we've been doing might be able to open up and become more and more public. And I'm seeing evidence of that everywhere. I mean, I just look at all the podcasts and all the videos that are out there, people speculating about this fifth dimension, and some very distinguished scholars are working on it. So I think it's the best of times and the worst of times. So thank you.
Just what it usually is in history. Let me throw something out as an optional question, maybe even to wrap it up. So it's 2022, and we're on the other side of the worst of it, and we're all still here, and you know, our loved ones are still here. What's changed? And I'll start. And this is on an ideal, you know, what would you like to see, kind of a dream thing. For me, I'll start. There's less faith in the stock market and more attention to local, what economy truly means, which is, you know, building a life around the communities that are there. And there's less worry about what traders think or, you know, are doing and plunging things into and trying to pull out of. And I'll go, it's an optional question, but I'll throw that out there. What's changed? It's 2022. What has changed?
So less of
Go
Wall
ahead,
Street.
go ahead, John. Go ahead, John.
Less Wall Street. I'm just writing it down. Less of Wall Street and more of local economy and real economy. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think if I'm there at 2022, I'll be older for one. I don't know if I'll be wiser, but what I would ideally like to see is a better or more people honoring the fact that life has suffering and we need to work with it together and not separately, because the more we work with suffering separately, from my point of view, there is more suffering. So that's what I would like to see on whatever arena, in whatever arena. I mean, I could even ideally think that even rich people can get this. Even people that have a lot of money can get this. I don't want to take them the possibility that their humanity hasn't been stripped from them because of their, you know, attachment to their money. So that's what I would like to be present for,
Mm-hmm.
I have a kind of socio-political answer to this, and that's that, one, I think the crisis won't be over. I think perhaps the health scare will be over, but in some ways the crisis, the meta crisis, will have deepened and become more complex. But I think part of what can happen is that people will demand competent government.
Ooh.
I think that there's going to be a upswelling in demand for competence in government. Not necessarily democracy, not necessarily, just maybe some of our ideals, like something along with the older ideals. Like I think that we're seeing breakdowns now in foresight, the forethought, the caring, the attunement of some levels, especially the federal level of government in the U.S., but looking at the same thing in the EU and the UK, and we're going to want things to be much better managed in going forward. And I think this is exposing like how much kind of carelessness has gone on, how skewed the priorities have been, like how much malfeasance, waste, all of that I think is just going to come to the fore. And, you can tolerate that when things are good and, the stock market is booming and unemployment is low and everybody's got like a supply, the supply lines are working for food and construction and everything. But I think when all that stuff starts to break down, there's going to be a demand, as it were, like in the market of history, in the market of ideas, for for a new generation, I hope, in leadership that is more sensitive, is more sensitized, and is more reflecting of, I think, the attitudes of people that, and this I'm thinking of like even younger than me, like who like are used to a planetary kind of environment, milieu. Like we're growing up in a global environment, interconnected, where there's these rapid feedback loops where things are happening fast. And I think they're going to want something different than what the prior generations, X, boomers, and others have wanted. I think that's part of what's going to start awakening in 2022 and past that.
Good.
Thank you for that question. And that I don't have anything else to add in this dial. We're a couple of hours into it. I just want to thank you all. Thank you all.
Yeah, I just want to say, Marco, my own daughter, who's 28, actually busted my butt and says, "You old people did this to us." On your comment, I got that from my own daughter.
Wow.
So, yeah, way to go. Thank you, everybody. Mateo, you got something to say? Huh?
I can always say something. The one thing I love about this group and this circle is on more than a mental level, it just runs like a carousel through me. I've got something to say about almost each thing that every person is saying, and then it just keeps moving and growing, and I really appreciate it. Yeah. I don't how much time do we have? I don't
we're wrapping up probably in a few. This is sort of like our summary, right? Yeah. Yeah, but take all the time you need.
Yeah. Yeah, I going back to Marco's question of the link between coronavirus and God, I think that we're coy about dodging it, but I think we went head on to it. I mean, I would say I can't represent Sri Aurobindo's thought in any sort of way. I can just kind of feel reflections, but TJ bringing in the history of the bubonic plague, etc. I really think there's an evolutionary spur there. And that's chapter 1 of the Life Divine, basically disharmonies helping spur the evolution to expand human consciousness. And I don't know anything about fifth dimension ontology, but I think what you're getting at is reflected in the Upanishads. It's the Mundakya Upanishad is the exposition of Om, where the Ah is waking consciousness, the U is dream state consciousness, and the is super conscient causal consciousness, and the space between is the transcendent. And I don't even like getting really fancy with all that terminology, but there's a floating, and then I saw it tied in with John bring it ka ro na, and I was hearing and then I was thinking for years. And then like we had the experience but missed the meaning, and approach to the meaning restored the experience beyond anything that we assigned to happiness. And then Bob Dylan comes in with Ballad of a Thin Man. For years I thought it was a generation gap till I actually listened to the song. There's something happening here that you just don't understand. Do you, Mr. Jones? It's actually a critique of mental consciousness, and everything about it is all these different aspects of dream state consciousness and the importance of that to manifesting and actually like anchoring something here in on the earth. And the Mira Alfasa, who was called the mother, she's one of my dearest teachers. If anyone has touched her work, I think you'd have a glimpse of how incredibly evolved she was. And she reported going into meditation sometime in the late 60s, early 70s, and really working with the nature power up until humans evolved the ability to understand that there's collaborative potential in the evolution of human consciousness. Nature, the evolution through nature, through matter and life and early levels of mind, dog is not aware of collaboration in the evolution of consciousness. Love the dogs, love the fish. I don't see an awareness there. And humans, there's an awareness happening that's linked in with our dream state consciousness, that's linked in with silent mind, and then it's linked in with the nirvanic state of non-existence, where things start coming back. And 2022, we're going to see these incremental changes like we did after the planes hit the towers, and they're all just evolutionary spurs that cause just a little more opening. It's a process, and it's slow to our myopic vision. We only have 100 years if we're lucky. We might not even have that. We don't know. And dang, this group is beautiful. I really appreciate all the sharing. And Michael, it's ironic, 2 weeks at the California primary, so-called Super Tuesday, my nervous sheath, my vital body was spent. I had to completely detach. I was like sucked into it. It was the realm of the hungry ghost for me, and I cut media at that point. I've only just recently started queuing back into a few media sources, but on a really limited basis. My body needed a rest from that, and the timing is everything. It like ties right into this at home, staying at home. I'm taking it as a spiritual retreat, and just remembering to breathe. And it's really
Awesome.
it's an honor to be with you all. Yeah, I'll cut it there.
Thank you, Mateo.
Yeah, thank you, Mateo.
Thank you, Mateo. I just
Thank
wanted
you.
to answer your question. Did you want to go now? I wanted to answer your question about the future, TJ, and 2022, and what will I know then? And this is my future. This is my past. Actually, I think this is my present. Both of these are sculptures by Michelangelo. This is his last sculpture. It's a really wobbly 2 figures, one behind the other. I call this, for me, it's Gnostic voices. This is where I am now. This is my future. And I think this is what happens right here. that third ear and the third eye, seeking coordination, which is what I've been working on a lot lately. And I think it's kind of messy and confusing, but that's sort of my psychic landscape that I'm working with. But I think that Michelangelo's David, and that to me is the divine double. And I already have an intense relationship. Every night when I go to sleep, there's this relationship with another myself, another self in these dream landscapes with varying degrees of consciousness. And I believe I have a relationship to this divine double. This is very old. This is very, very old stuff. But I feel when this incarnation is over, he's coming to pick me up. And I'm going to go with him. And I'm signed, sealed, and delivered. So I'm just here hanging out, doing the best I can. And, you know, making friends and hopefully influencing people in creative ways. So thank you all for having this, this circle, this sort of circle of light and dark that we're working with here. So I think it's great. Thank you.
Well, John, you're definitely an influence on me. I'll speak for myself.
And vice versa, believe me.
E3.
I'll briefly respond to the question, but so I looked 2 years back in 2018. I keep an online journal, so it's easy to access. And well, my world is what I focus on. I wish I would focus occasionally on the outer world. I have no recollection of politics at the time, but what was going on here, what we do was very important at that time. Jeffrey was just sharing his Plenum series. There was the Writers Underground going on. We were reading Slaughterdyke, just beginning, Globes, it looked like. And at the house, I shared Gonzalez, solo piano artist. Pretty interesting music. I was sharing that with my son. I think that was before we started the Tour de CD nightly, which still plays on loop. So in 2022, that will still be playing on loop if the CD player still works. We were reading Soul Mountain, some of us. So I'm expecting more of the same. More interactions here, a few extra individuals coming in. Perhaps we might be having to accommodate an influx of people who are seeking a different world that we're separated from each other. So they're going online. YouTube's a little bit slow, so they say, well, maybe I'll search for that latest something. Maybe the Axial Age will come up and they'll get a hit Axial Age 3 and watch the video, and they'll join forces here. I was looking over Slaughterdyke's poems just in case we think about reading. I think a lot of us have the book on the shelf, either opened or unopened, but I'm going to spoil it and say he ends it by referring to King Arthur's round table. And I think that's pretty fitting. I just read that a few minutes ago before getting on the call, just checking, flipping through. And so I appreciate you all. It's been good. Good evening.
I think you're a prince, Doug. You're a prince in shining armor.
TJ, did you answer that question?
My own question?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, the Wall Street would have less control.
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
I wrote
yeah.
it down. I have to listen
Yeah.
to this again. Once again, I forget often what's happened until I listen and watch the archive. So
Yeah.
Thank
I
you
really
all.
like Marco's point about the change in government and the expectations, though. I think that's
Yeah,
food for thought. That's really gonna be food for thought.
that goes a little bit to the actual age when we were discussing power, doesn't it?
Mhm. Yep.
And you know, the kingship and ethical action that we need to demand of our leaders.
And that Alexander Went talking about the world state and how his experience of it, sitting in a shower, and he could not imagine that nation states would be the way people are living 200 years from now. Nation states being able to do whatever the fuck they want to their own people or to anyone else that they could dominate. So could this be the sign, a sign of the crumbling of the nation state? It seems like China, the Soviet Union, the United States, Europe, they can all go and do their own thing now because they've exited from Brexit, you know. I don't know, but I think that there's that possibility. Since our minds are entangled through language, it does seem that we would have to eventually have a politics that acknowledges that. And these may be growing pains, but it may be the pollution and the toxicity of the environments, which do not know anything about nation states. We get China's pollution, Europe gets America's pollution, and it just goes around the globe and settles in wherever it wants to, and it doesn't give a shit about who the president is or the gross national product or, you know, any of the things that those path dependencies we've established with fossil fuels. So I think maybe that's another topic for another day, but I think there's that potential that could be happening now. Seriously, I mean, we've speculated for a long time, but I think it may happen very quickly, actually. Maybe swifter than we could possibly imagine.
Well, I think that's definitely one thing that has, that we're learning through this coronavirus is how quickly things can change. And I think we're getting a seminar in the exponential curve, and we're getting a feel for what it's like to make that, from relatively flat to relatively vertical.
0 to 60.
Right. All right. Well, I better get going. I have from the family to see, and
stay well, everybody.
yeah,
Stay healthy.
Yeah, you
definitely.
too.
Well, well.
Wonderful seeing you all.
Thank you very much, all.
Good talk.
Thank you.
Blessings.
Thanks, man.
Blessing. Bye-bye.
See
Take
you
care,
next
everybody.
time.
Yep.